a double bear.
A turntable hisses. A needle drops. Somewhere in a kitchen that no longer exists, a transistor radio glows orange on a windowsill, and a steel guitar bends a note that sounds like a memory trying to survive. 1979, the year country music stopped being background noise and started being confession.
'Cause drinking doubles alone.
10 songs came out of that year that didn't just chart, they changed who was allowed to tell the truth in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Songs about violence, addiction, guilt, and love that couldn't be saved. Songs that got played at funerals and weddings in the same week. If you've ever hit subscribe before a song even finishes playing, do it now, because by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why one artist almost didn't release it at all. The countdown begins now. Number 10, Bandy and Janie Fricke. It's a cheating situation. 1979. Picture a honky-tonk parking lot at closing time. Gravel under boots. A neon sign buzzing the word open, even though everyone inside already knows it's over.
For we know they're not gonna let.
Bandy didn't write pretty songs. He wrote true ones. By 1979, he'd built a career on the kind of country music that Nashville's polished production teams were starting to phase out. Steel guitar, honest heartbreak, no orchestral gloss. It's a cheating situation, wasn't a metaphor. It was a diagnosis. A relationship not ending, not beginning, just circling in a holding pattern of guilt and habit.
No love at home.
The song became a duet almost by accident. Janie Fricke, a session singer whose voice had already been heard by millions of Americans without them ever learning her name, she'd sung backup and jingles for years, stepped into the second verse and turned Bandy's confession into a conversation. Two people, both aware they were doing something wrong, both unable to stop.
And it's a cheating situation.
It hit number 1. It won a CMA award, and it cracked open a door that traditional, unglamorous honky-tonk country thought had already closed on it. The door back into the mainstream, right as the genre was being pulled toward pop production and crossover ambition.
When there's no.
But here's what almost nobody remembers. Janie Fricke was, for years, one of the most heard uncredited voices in American music. And this duet was one of the first times the public actually got to put a face to a voice they'd been hearing behind other people's hits for most of the decade.
We'll take love where we find.
Janie Fricke spent years as an in-demand Nashville session vocalist, her voice buried in the backing tracks of songs credited entirely to other artists. It's a cheating situation was one of her first moments of true visibility, meaning that for years, America had already fallen in love with her voice without ever knowing it was hers.
Sweetheart.
There's a reason this next song almost got buried by its own label. Number 9. Number 9. Barbara Mandrell, Sleeping Single in a Double Bed, 1978-79. A bedroom, half lit by streetlight through Venetian blinds. One side of the bed still made, the other side wrinkled, empty, cold. Barbara Mandrell had already spent over a decade as one of the hardest working women in country music, a multi-instrumentalist who could play steel guitar, saxophone, and banjo well enough to headline sessions herself, long before most labels would let a woman lead a band. Sleeping Single in a Double Bed became her signature crossover into the top of the charts in 1979, a song about a marriage that hadn't technically ended, but had already emptied out.
Sleeping single in a double bed.
What made the record different was how unglamorous it let itself be. It didn't dress the loneliness up. It didn't rhyme it into something bearable. It just described a bed, a room, a silence, and let listeners fill in their own version of that same room.
Double bed.
Mandrell would go on to become one of the most visible women in country music, hosting her own network variety show within a few years. But 1979 was the year she proved a song about domestic loneliness could top the charts without a single string section trying to soften it. Behind the fame, though, Mandrell's story carries a weight most fans wouldn't learn until years later. In 1984, 5 years after this song made her a household name, Barbara Mandrell was involved in a near-fatal head-on car collision that killed the other driver and left her with injuries that ended her ability to perform physically the way she once had. The woman who sang about emptiness in a bed would spend years relearning how to walk across a stage.
Sleeping single in a double bed.
The next artist on this list didn't want fame. He almost walked away from it entirely, right before writing one of 1979's biggest anthems. Number 8. Don Williams, Tulsa Time, 1979. A highway at dusk, a dashboard glowing green, a man driving toward a city he never planned to end up in, because the life he'd planned for himself simply stopped working out. Don Williams was already known as the gentle giant of country music, a deep, unhurried baritone that never needed to shout to be heard. Tulsa Time, written by Danny Flowers, became one of his signature hits in 1979, a song about reinvention that didn't dress itself up as triumphant. It was tired. It was practical. It was about surviving somewhere you never intended to stay. What made Williams different from the outlaw country movement swirling around him? Waylon, Willie, the rebellious edge dominating headlines, was his refusal to perform anguish. He simply told the truth in a low, steady voice, and audiences trusted him more because he never raised it. Tulsa Time would later be covered by Eric Clapton, a detail that quietly reveals how far Williams's understated style had traveled outside the genre's usual borders. Rock guitarists were listening to Nashville session players. The wall between genres was already crumbling, and almost nobody was talking about it. Don Williams was famously private to the point of near invisibility, rarely giving interviews, rarely explaining his songs, rarely appearing on the flashy television specials his peers used to build stardom. In an industry built on personality and spectacle, Williams built one of the most enduring careers in country music by refusing to sell anything but the song itself. But not every artist on this list got to choose how much of themselves they revealed. Number 7's Confession nearly ended his career before it started.
I know it's crazy to worry like
Number 7. Eddie Rabbitt, Suspicions, 1979. A phone that won't stop almost ringing. A silence stretched so tight it becomes its own kind of sound.
you get in your eyes when you love.
Eddie Rabbitt had already proven himself as a songwriter for other artists. He co-wrote Kentucky Rain for Elvis Presley in 1970, before Suspicions became one of his own defining hits in 1979. The song's brilliance was in what it refused to resolve. It never confirmed the affair. It never denied it. It simply sat inside the unbearable tension of not knowing and trusted the listener to recognize that particular kind of dread.
But what I'm thinking of, I get the
Rabbitt was part of a wave of country artists in the late 70s who were pulling the genre toward pop radio, layering smoother production over traditional songwriting instincts, and Suspicions became one of the clearest examples of that crossover ambition, succeeding on both charts simultaneously.
somebody's gonna steal you away from me.
The song's power came from its restraint. Rabbitt's voice never breaks, never accuses, never begs. It simply lives inside doubt, verse after verse, letting the tension do what a scream never could.
And I really shouldn't feel this way.
Before he became a star performer, Eddie Rabbitt spent years as a songwriter whose work made other artists famous, while his own name stayed largely unknown to casual listeners, including writing Kentucky Rain for Elvis Presley nearly a decade before Suspicions made Rabbitt himself a star. It took almost 10 years of writing hits for other people before the industry let him keep one for himself.
So good looking, I'm afraid some.
We're at the halfway point of tonight's countdown. And if you think you already know which song claims the #1 spot, you don't. Because the story behind it isn't about a broken heart. It's about a decision one man almost didn't make, one that would define the rest of his life.
Lying here with you.
Number 6. Anne Murray, I Just Fall in Love Again, 1979. A porch light left on for someone who already came home. A record spinning quietly in a living room where the argument ended hours ago.
It must be magic.
Anne Murray was Canadian, which in 1979 made her something of an outsider in a genre deeply rooted in American regional identity. Yet, I Just Fall in Love Again became one of the defining country pop crossover hits of the year, spending weeks at the top of the country charts. Murray's voice carried none of the theatrical ache that dominated the genre's biggest ballads. It was warm, steady, almost conversational, as if she were simply stating a fact rather than performing an emotion.
To take me to a star.
That plainness was deceptive. Murray had spent years fighting to be taken seriously in an industry that often treated her crossover success as evidence she wasn't really country, even as her records outsold many artists who never left the format.
In love again. Just one.
I Just Fall in Love Again became one of several massive Murray hits that quietly proved a woman didn't need to sound broken to sing convincingly about love. She could simply sound certain. For much of her career, Anne Murray battled crippling stage fright and anxiety about touring, a detail she rarely discussed publicly during her peak years, meaning that the woman singing some of the warmest, most confident love songs of the era was, off-stage, quietly enduring one of the most common and least talked about struggles in the music industry.
I'm in love with you.
The next artist on this list didn't cross over from another genre. He built an entirely new one out of a fiddle solo that almost didn't make the final cut.
Make a deal when he came across this young man sawing on the fiddle and playing it high.
Number 5. Charlie Daniels Band, The Devil Went Down to Georgia, 1979. A dirt road at midnight, a boy with a fiddle case, a stranger waiting at the crossroads, smiling like he already knows how this ends.
When the devil finished, Johnny said, well, you're pretty good, old son, but...
By 1979, Charlie Daniels had already spent nearly 2 decades as a session musician, playing on records for Bob Dylan, and dozens of other artists before The Devil Went Down to Georgia turned him into a headlining star in his own right. The song's premise, a literal fiddle contest against the devil for a soul, was almost absurdly theatrical for a genre built on plain-spoken realism, and yet it became one of the biggest crossover hits of the year, winning a Grammy and cementing Daniels as a genre-blending force between country, rock, and southern folklore.
Well, just come on back if you ever want to try again. I done told you once, you son of...
What made the song endure wasn't just the storytelling, it was the performance, a blistering, technically demanding fiddle arrangement that took the instrument out of its usual supporting role and turned it into the main character of the record.
Devil's in the house of the rising sun.
The song's massive success also marked a turning point in how country radio approached novelty and narrative songs, proving that a genre often accused of formula could still surprise an entire generation with a single unconventional idea. Before The Devil Went Down to Georgia made him a star, Charlie Daniels spent nearly 20 anonymous years as a Nashville session player, contributing to other artists' legacies, including sessions for Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline, without his own name ever appearing on a marquee. Fame, when it finally came, arrived after 2 decades of being the most important person in the room that nobody in the audience could name. We're closing in on the top of the countdown now, and the next voice on this list didn't just sing about heartbreak. She carried someone else's unfinished legacy every time she stepped on stage. Number 4. Emmylou Harris, Blue Kentucky Girl, 1979. A screen door swinging shut behind a woman who isn't coming back, the same person who left.
Shines on your Kentucky girl.
By 1979, Emmylou Harris had already survived one of the most quietly devastating losses in American music history, the death of Graham Parsons in 1973, the mentor and creative partner who had discovered her singing in a Washington, D.C. folk club and helped shape the sound that would define her entire career. Blue Kentucky Girl, the title track from her 1979 album, became one of the clearest statements of Harris stepping fully into her own identity as an artist, separate from the shadow of the man who first believed in her.
I need no diamond rings.
The song itself was a cover. Harris was one of the era's most respected interpreters of other writers' material, but her version became so definitive that it reshaped how audiences understood the original. Harris didn't just perform songs. She excavated them, finding emotional truths inside lyrics that previous versions had left unexplored. The album marked a turning point where Harris fully committed to traditional country instrumentation at a moment when much of the genre was drifting toward pop crossover, a deliberate act of preservation as much as artistry.
Kentucky girl.
Graham Parsons, the man who discovered Emmylou Harris and shaped the musical partnership that launched her career, died of a drug and alcohol-related overdose in 1973 at just 26 years old, meaning that every record Harris released for years afterward, including Blue Kentucky Girl, was in some way a continuation of a creative conversation that had been violently, permanently cut in half.
Kentucky girl.
3 songs remain, and the next one belongs to a family act that turned sibling harmony into one of the biggest hits of the entire year.
Middle of Beverly Hills and somebody.
Number 3. Larry Gatlin and the Gatlin Brothers, All the Gold in California, 1979.
Right down to your soul.
A Greyhound bus pulling into a station under a sky the color of an old photograph. Larry Gatlin had been writing songs since childhood, performing alongside his brothers Steve and Rudy in gospel and country harmony groups years before All the Gold in California became their signature #1 hit in 1979. The song's central image, a stranger stepping off a bus with nothing, chasing a promise the West Coast had made to an entire generation of dreamers, tapped directly into a very specific American anxiety, the fear of arriving somewhere with everything you own and still not being enough. The Gatlin brothers' close vocal harmony, built from decades of singing together as a family, gave the song a texture no solo artist could have replicated. It sounded less like a performance and more like three men who had actually lived inside the same disappointment and were now singing their way out of it together. Larry Gatlin wrote nearly all the group's material himself, a rarity in an era when Nashville's hit machine often separated performers from songwriters entirely. That control over their own story would define the family's identity for decades. Larry Gatlin has spoken openly, in interviews conducted well after his peak fame, about a period of cocaine addiction during the years surrounding his greatest commercial success, meaning the man singing about broken California dreams was, behind the scenes, already living inside a different kind of collapse that country audiences of 1979 knew nothing about.
Trying to be a hero.
2 songs remain before we reach the top of this countdown, and the next one belongs to a man whose gentlest ballad hid the guilt of years spent somewhere else entirely.
Held it all in work. God knows.
Number 2, Waylon Jennings, Amanda, 1979 release.
Fate should have made a gentle.
A tour bus idling outside a house with the porch light on, and a man staring at it through tinted glass, unable to make himself go inside.
Look in the mirror in total.
Amanda was written years before its 1979 release, one of the rare Waylon Jennings recordings that wasn't outlaw swagger or highway defiance, but a quiet, aching apology. Jennings, one of the architects of the outlaw country movement alongside Willie Nelson, built his reputation on rebellion against Nashville's polished production system. But Amanda stripped all of that away. It was gentle, unguarded, a direct address to a woman who had waded through years of a husband's absence, addiction, and chaos. The song became one of Jennings's biggest hits, specifically because it broke character. Fans who loved him for his outlaw defiance suddenly heard him admit, in plain language, that the cost of that lifestyle had been paid by someone else, someone who stayed.
Full awakening in a country boy.
Jennings held the song back from release for years before finally putting it out in 1979, reportedly uncertain whether it revealed too much. When it finally reached the top of the charts, it became one of the most emotionally direct hits of his entire career.
A gentleman's wife.
During the years surrounding Amanda's writing and eventual release, Waylon Jennings was in the grip of a well-documented cocaine addiction, so severe it would later cost him millions of dollars and nearly his life, meaning the tenderness in Amanda wasn't nostalgia. It was a man, still actively inside the storm, trying to apologize to his wife before he even knew if he'd survive it.
To look in the mirror.
And now, the story you've been waiting for. The song at number 1 didn't just top the charts in 1979. It became one of the most quietly controversial number 1 hits in country music history, and almost nobody outside Nashville knew why.
Something always told me they were reading Tom.
Number 1, Kenny Rogers, Coward of the County, 1979. A small southern town, a church pew, a young man raised by his father's dying words. Promise me you won't be like me. Words that were about to be tested in the worst possible way.
Tommy's love was Becky.
By 1979, Kenny Rogers was already one of the biggest crossover stars in American music, but Coward of the County was something different from his usual polished ballads. It was a narrative song built around a devastating premise. A young man's commitment to nonviolence is shattered when his girlfriend is assaulted by 3 brothers, forcing him to choose between his father's pacifist legacy and an act of violent retribution.
Tommy opened up the door, saw his...
The song's subject matter, sexual assault, generational trauma, and vigilante justice, was almost unheard of for a mainstream country radio hit in 1979. Rogers and his label reportedly had internal debates about how directly the song could address what happens to the girlfriend, ultimately keeping the lyrics suggestive rather than explicit, trusting listeners to understand the horror without spelling it out.
If you turn the other cheek.
Despite, or perhaps because of, its heavy subject matter, Coward of the County became one of the biggest hits of Rogers' career, later adapted into a television movie that expanded the story for audiences who wanted to understand the world behind the 3-minute song.
He wasn't holding nothing back.
What made the record work wasn't shock value, it was empathy. The song never celebrated the violence at its climax. It mourned the fact that peace hadn't been enough to protect the people the protagonist loved.
I heard him say, I promised you, Dad.
Coward of the County was one of the first mainstream country hits to directly confront sexual assault as its central plot point, at a time when the genre, and much of American media, rarely gave the subject any direct acknowledgement at all.
Now please don't think I'm weak, I couldn't turn.
The song succeeded not despite that darkness, but because Kenny Rogers and his collaborators trusted country audiences to sit with something uncomfortable rather than looking away from it. Decades later, the song remains a rare artifact of a genre choosing honesty over comfort, even when comfort would have sold just as well.
The other cheek. Papa, I sure hope you...
10 songs, 10 years, decades, entire lives compressed into 3 minutes each. Every one of these records was a letter mailed to a future version of us, sealed in 1979, addressed to whoever needed to hear it decades later.
Too. And if you care to take a dare, I'll make a bet with you.
The artists who sang them carried things the charts never showed: addiction, grief, guilt they couldn't outrun, and still, they gave us songs that told the truth anyway.
Light of my life.
If tonight moved you, tell us below which song hit hardest, and subscribe. Because we are not done uncovering the voices behind the legends.
was bottled up inside him.
The music never lies, even when the industry does.
3 boys set out to see the world.